Hello and welcome to Florida Basketball Hour. I am Neil Blackman, Saturday Down South, joined tonight by Eric Fawcett, GatorCountry.com, Basket Under Review, Slapping Glass, various places that you'll find Mr. Fawcett's work. The great Eric Fawcett joining us tonight to break down Florida's season-ending 73-72 second round NCAA tournament loss to Iowa. The Gators championship season, SEC title winning season, ends with a thud in Tampa. A Florida team that won 27 games and earned a 1 seed for the second straight season. First time in program history that the Gators had earned 1 seeds in back-to-back seasons. Outdone by Iowa's methodical tempo. Outdone by Iowa's game plan, which I thought, not only did they kind of pick up on sort of a defensive area where they thought they could exploit it beautifully in the first half, that then they adjusted to the adjustment that Florida made in the second half. Just seemed kind of a step ahead of Florida tactically throughout the night, and that's how you offset the sort of talent disadvantage that Iowa has when they play a Florida. I mean, obviously, when you look at Iowa, I heard some podcasters talking about Bennett Sturts as a potential lottery pick, and there's really not. I think there's kind of 4 credible mock drafts, at least based on their accuracy in the last year and their ability to kind of pick up what teams are actually doing. Those are the Ringer, The Athletic, No Ceilings, and ESPN. Every other mock has too many inaccuracies to be particularly reliable. There isn't one that has Bennett Sturts in the lottery. So, he's not a lottery pick player. He could be an NBA player. And, in fact, even though I know the narrative around this game was that he didn't play well, we'll get to that with Eric. I thought he played fantastic in a lot of ways. It is obviously a huge reason that Iowa won the game, but the reality is Florida has multiple guys that are going to play in the NBA for a long time. Shouldn't have lost this game. The Gators are a better team. Better teams do not always win in one-game tournaments. It's something that we talked about last year when we kind of debated whether or not Florida was the best team in the country, right? And I know the Duke fans will argue until the end of eternity that they were the best team last year and that Florida wasn't the best team. It's just that Florida won 6 games in a row. And, certainly over the course of the regular season, you could make that argument, right? You could argue that the Duke had Cooper Flagg. I don't think that anybody could have seen what Con Knippel was going to do in the NBA in year 1, but certainly they had Con Knippel. Zion James, they had a lot of great players. And were they better than Florida over the course of the year? Maybe in at least in analytical and predictive metrics they were. Probably in top-end talent they were. But Florida won the NCAA championship. So it's a one-game tournament. Funny things happen. We could get into all that, but the reality of Sunday night was Iowa had a great plan. I thought they executed that plan really kind of perfectly. And if you go to patreon.com/FloridaBBR, which remains the best way to support our podcast, you'll want to do that this summer too. We'll get into all that at the end of the show. But if you go over to patreon.com/FloridaBBR, there's about as good a breakdown of this game as you're going to get anywhere. There's probably not an Iowa site that's comparable. There's not a national person, and Fawcett is a national person that's doing anything like this. It's incredible. He did great work on it. So we welcome in Eric Fawcett. Obviously not the way Florida wanted its SEC championship winning season to end. There's a lot of good things you could take away from this year. It's very hard to earn back-to-back 1 seeds to the NCAA tournament. There's a reason only a handful of programs have ever done it. But Sunday night, the Gators weren't good enough. They didn't coach well enough. They didn't play well enough, and they will not be playing in the Sweet 16.
Yeah, it's always interesting when there's an upset of any magnitude to see the way that it is either framed by a lot of people as this is all about the team that won, that did the upsetting versus the, how much did the expected team to win choke or fail or anything like that. It's it was just an absolute Ben McCullum masterclass. There have been a lot of people beating the drum of this is the best coach in the sport, who hasn't, totally had his chance quite yet to get on everyone's radar. But I mean, man, 4 Division II national championships, which is unheard of, to go take Drake right to the NCAA tournament, win a game, miraculous in the hardest one bid league in the country to win, to take Drake players like that. That is one thing. If you're looking for a reason to be gutted by this loss, like this was a Missouri Valley team. This was 5 players that were a Drake last year and a Robert Morris player and a freshman and a sophomore at Iowa. Like this was a Missouri Valley team that just went in and controlled the game against Florida, which I just think was unbelievable by McCullum. You mentioned that they played perfectly. It's so interesting in the fact that I do think they played perfectly, but it's also been hilarious to see the takeaways from a lot of national media. And I mean, I won't say, but there was, one podcast that people will really know on this, or a lot of you will listen to it. And they probably, I would say from their breakdown of the game, there was a couple members that were probably not particularly locked into this game because they were like, oh, well, really good game by Iowa. And so yeah, Bennett Sturts didn't play that great. And then they're like, oh yeah, it went 0 for 9 from 3. And then they're like, oh, so who played well for Iowa? And then they were all like, Koch hit some shot, and that is kind of what is remarkable about this game is often when there is an upset, it takes a couple of players playing incredibly. And I do think that Iowa played incredibly as a unit, but it wasn't like they had the one player that went 7 for 10 from the 3-point line. It wasn't like they had the one player that was just unguardable by the Gators. I did think Bennett Sturts was still very, very good. I know his point total and efficiency didn't look that way. I still think he showed where he can have an off night and still be that impactful. I still think he was tremendous. But in that kind of speaks to the brilliance of Iowa and the brilliance of Ben McCullum. They did not have the Herculean effort from 1 or 2 players. They just completely executed their game plan with a bunch of Missouri Valley players, and it upset a team that had hundreds of percent more of NIL, hundreds of percent more of talent. And it is interesting. Like you kind of set off the top, it is a 1-game elimination. It's always hard to kind of talk about well, how do you evaluate an ending like this? Do you just chalk it up to, well, it's a single game elimination, this happens? Obviously some people swing too far the other end of the pendulum, I would say, where it's everything is on the NCAA tournament. But I do think it was interesting in the sense that Florida's kind of build with the two big stuff, or having 4 bigs on the roster, rolling through them all. And Kevin Sweeney at Sports Illustrated did a really good story on this, had some really good quotes from the staff, how it was all about, we built this team because we thought that by playing the defense, rebounding, supersized thing, it really raised our floor. Yes, it did, but it hurt the ceiling. And when you're at the University of Florida, I don't think you need to be worried about are we going to beat Prairie View A&M by 60 instead of 35? I do think to an extent, when you're at the University of Florida, you should not be thinking about how do we get our floor up, because that should not be an issue. It should be about how do you win championships, make Final Fours? Yes, they won a championship. So a lot of people who will take this bit of criticism I have for the staff and the way they built the roster, they will take that as, well, they won a natty, so everything you say is invalid. Maybe so, but that's just kind of for that story, even from Kevin, to come out not that long ago. But we built this way to increase our floor. Okay, well, the floor was plenty high. They really beat the crap out of a lot of bad teams this year, but when it came to beating the ones that mattered, couldn't always do it. Saw it in the SEC tournament, saw it in the NCAA tournament. So I do find that element of it pretty interesting. And again, these Missouri Valley bigs completely taking Ruben Chinyelu out of the game, remarkable. And I do think where Florida all season long was so dedicated to the same lineups, the same, like, we are playing big. They did it last year when I was like, this is the third year. 3 years ago, I was like, they shouldn't roll with the starting lineup. They shouldn't play these guys as much as they do. They did it all year. Last season would have changed the, kind of a lot of the lineups. They never did it. They were super steadfast in doing it. This year, steadfast in playing the same lineups, no matter what, playing big, until it got to Iowa, and even the fact that we saw minutes with Condon at the 5 and Hauck at the 4. Now, that's something we've been advocating for all season long, but the fact that they never really did it, and they had to do it in what ultimately was their most important game of the season, I felt like that's when the alarm bells start to ring, when your identity is this, and you keep saying, like, this is our identity, this identity. Well, when push came to shove, it wasn't. And then, of course, that makes you wonder all season long, could they have been preparing a little bit differently, having different lineups? But there, Neil, is my opening monologue with any number of places you could take it or respond to.
Yeah, no, that was great. And Eric hopped on about a minute after mine started. So everybody heard, me echo some of the same points, except for Eric. Although, like, Eric, the only other point I guess that I articulated that I guess you either will or won't find value in, was just that, and when I say that Iowa played perfectly, like, obviously they didn't, play a perfect game. Who has ever played a perfect game? But I think, like, it was super interesting to me that, they had a plan in place, and their plan in place was already an adjustment to Florida's, what they felt like Florida would do to them. So not only did they adjust to, like, what they assumed Florida's adjustment to, like, their style would be, they then adjusted to that adjustment in the second half, which allowed them to extend their lead. And Florida played uphill the whole game. It ends up a 61 possession game. That meant that was the fewest possessions that Florida had played in a game all year. So this much debated discussion, and, like, really smart people, Riley Davis and Sleepers Media. There were a bunch of others who just thought there's no way that Iowa will be able to impose tempo on Florida. And, like, they did. And the reason they did is because they got ahead because their game plan worked. And then when Florida tried to adjust to it, they adjusted the adjustment. And then Florida was, like, late getting Isaiah Brown onto the floor and going to the Hauck Condon thing that Eric and I have said since November should be something that Florida plays some lineup rotations with more. It was very clear to me in the building within 10 minutes that Chenyolu, their plan on Chenyolu was, we're just going to try to make tough twos over him. And, like, that's great if you can do it. And Tavion Banks played out of his mind. He's the one guy on the floor who I thought played out of his mind from either team. I don't think he could play that good if they played Florida 10 times, but he made multiple incredibly difficult shots at the rim out of the pick and roll in the first half. But those were the shots that Ben McCollum knew they had to make to win, right? And they designed plays to get those shots. And so, like, what was fascinating was, and Kevin Sweeney's story is great. Go check it out if you, like, want a postmortem on this roster construction. It's a roster construction that got a 1 seed. I think, and maybe this is where to kick it back before we get into how Florida just got annihilated in the short roll in the first half. And I have some anecdotes that I got working down there on that. So maybe we can go in that direction. But I wanted to kind of broader roster construction thought was, like, Florida plays the way that they want to play. And their idea is, like, we're going to impose our will on people. And, that's just that. And that's fine. And obviously it's gotten a national title and 2 1 seeds and a team that was really, really good in the second half of the year 3 years ago too. So, like, and they've been eliminated in 2 of the last 3 NCAA tournaments on basically buzzer beaters. So, like, it's fine. It's more than fine to do it that way. I do think, like, long term, like, now I wouldn't criticize Florida's roster construction as much as I'd say, like, as a staff, it's time to sort of, who's schematically going to be able to cook somebody up. And that would be, like, the one thing that I would be thinking about in this offseason, because I guess I just kind of innately trust what Sapphire and Golden do from a roster building standpoint. For example, like, the guards in this game, were the reason that Florida was down 2 at halftime. When we had Condon, when the front court minus Condon essentially no-showed, like Xavier Lee was good. Urban Klavzar was good. Boogie Fland was good. Like he missed a couple jump shots, but he was good. So that kind of piece of it, I think, is probably more of a post-mortem show that isn't like the Iowa show. But I'll sell this anecdote, and then Eric can kind of break down this better. But it was funny. I mentioned to Ben McCullum in the press conference, and my question at the press conference was, hey, Florida's been outscored in the paint twice all year. The first time it happened was the Arizona game, and they bookended the year by getting outscored in the paint. That's remarkable, by the way, that it was twice. And I said, how in the world did you do that? Because I understand, like, Bennett Sturts got up here and said, well, we knew that we could be physical. Like, what's he going to say? And he said at like 2 or 3 in the morning, the night before the game, they were kind of finalizing what they wanted to talk about in walkthrough. And McCullum said they saw something and they thought it would work. And so I got more detail on that in the Iowa locker room from their assistants, because he kind of left it hanging there in the press conference. He's not going to. And McCullum told me, like, basically what happened is they watched the Texas and Kentucky game one more time. And he said, we wanted to watch a Texas game because Texas's points per possession and points in the paint were super high. And they thought, that's weird because Texas has one big guy. And he just said Texas annihilated Florida in short rolls. And he said Florida does not help on them. And it was a trend for nearly 40 games. And so in the first half, Florida didn't help on any short rolls. And Iowa crucified that. Just killed them. So Eric, maybe that's a good place to start.
Oh yeah. And this is where the Patreon is great. Just able to kind of do the type of content like this where we watch the film and we talk over it. So there is a very good breakdown of this on the Patreon. I know some people who are loyal supporters of ours have probably still not watched the video because it's too hard. I do hope at some point even those people watch it, because I think it'll be informative. But
yes.
Yeah, that's one of those things where in Florida's ethos of we do what we do and we try to impose ourselves, like it is predictable, and that if you are still, you've got the athletes, you can do it at a high level, that's okay. There's a lot of predictable teams that are still really, really good, but yeah, Florida has always guarded these angled pick and rolls the same way, and teams that want to set ball screens with the ball handler going towards the sideline, opening up the entire middle of the floor for a short roll, they're going to be able to hit that guy. And you even saw that going back to last year, where if Florida lost to Texas Tech, that would have been the story. Florida cannot guard the short roll. And in some ways you could say, oh, even the fact that Florida won that game against Texas Tech would be some support of that strategy of, hey, Florida got killed in the short roll, but didn't lose the game. Like, you lose a couple battles, but you win the war. If we're going to lose, it's going to be big men trying to make plays in the middle of the floor against us. Yeah. Like that's part of what Florida believes. And Iowa went to it repeatedly, and also very notably to just really ensure that Florida didn't help at all in the short roll, they put Bennett Sturts in the opposite guard spot. So typically, if you can imagine, the pick and roll is going towards the left sideline, like the ball handler is going towards the left sideline. He is trying to hit his big in the short roll around the nail. On the right side, that guard would be someone who could hypothetically help stunt, go tag, try to take away that short roll. So they put Bennett Sturts in that position, Boogie Fland guarding him. And of course, Boogie Fland does not want to leave Sturts at all. So Florida, who already doesn't want to overcommit to helping on short rolls, then you put a person in that position who, okay, if you're going to be the one to help on short rolls, it's going to be Bennett Sturts defender. They didn't want to leave Sturts, even though, he wasn't shooting the ball well, which is a decision that I think is still, an understandable one. Bennett Sturts can, presumably go off at any moment. And it was short roll after short roll after short roll. And it was also really interesting because if I was Iowa, I'm probably thinking to myself, hey, I think we can short roll. But what we should also do is play spread pick and roll so that when we hit the short roll, there isn't another defender at the rim to help. They did not do that, which is still kind of stunning to me looking back at the film. They still played that kind of 4 out, 1 in, and Chinyelu was left at the rim. Condon was left at the rim, where they put someone in the dunker spot, still played the short roll, which meant that a Chinyelu or a Condon was going to be there to help. And there was a couple of times where Chinyelu really walled up perfectly. Like he played it exactly as you would want him to do it defensively, kept his hands straight up, didn't foul, took it right in the chest. And Iowa's bigs made at least 3 really, really difficult ones against what was a really good defense by Florida. And that was one of those things that I think any close basketball game, like luck is going to play a big role. And you know what luck exactly is, we can argue, but looking back at the film, and again, that's why the Patreon is great to go look at these things again. Like those are the shots. Like I think when people think about big shots in a game or lucky shots, they think about 3-point variance. Like that's where it was incredible by Iowa, shooting 70% on twos, where a lot of them were really contested. I think a lot of people would look at that number and be like, man, Florida's defense must have been terrible. Yeah, there were times. Boogie Fland, wish he guarded a little bit, gave up some straight line drive layups, Klabsar gave up some straight line drive layups, but a lot of it was just incredible finishing through contact by Iowa. And a lot of it came from this short roll design that I don't think I would have done if I was Iowa. And Florida, while I, don't know if I totally agree with just like not helping at all at the nail on a short roll. They definitely had a great contest at the rim, and there was just some really, really tough shots made by Iowa. So that is one that I think if you're Florida, and I can probably guarantee you they are doing this, and any of you who want to go watch the Patreon video, if you're looking at like, oh my goodness, how did Florida lose this game? Like go back at some of those tough finishes that Iowa made against contact where Florida defended it well at the rim. Turned out to be a pretty big moment in the game. And then later when they put the ball back in Sturtz's hands, there was times where it was like a Hauk at the nail, and you did see that they were helping it on those short rolls, whether that was an adjustment, whether that's because Bennett Sturtz's defender wasn't the one who would have to make that decision. Those would be kind of some of the notes, but yeah, there was a very, very clear plan for Iowa, and one that they were able to execute, and also one that they really did well without the ball in Sturtz's hands, which is you again, if you would have said they're playing all these possessions without the ball in his hands, if he's going to finish 0 for 9 from 3, you probably thought Florida was going to win by 1,000. And I think that also just speaks to what was an incredible job by Iowa.
Yeah, I mean, again, 20 points in the paint off the pick and roll in the first half, 22 points in the paint. Florida outscored in the paint. Again, by 2 points, but only the second time all year they were outscored in the paint. And it's not like Florida doesn't make adjustments. In fact, we've seen, Todd Golden make good halftime adjustments a lot this season that have helped Florida. I think that coupled with Florida's physicality made Florida a pretty effective team in the second half, whether it was at Duke, whether it was against UConn, whether it was in this game when they got down 12 points and, they went a little smaller. And, at one point, I think Florida outscored Iowa, 22-8 to reclaim the lead, 61-60. If you want to even stretch that out farther, they outscored Iowa 26-9 to get it to 65-61 at one point, and it kind of looked like maybe Iowa was just going to die, and that to me was like why Bennett Sturtz was so awesome. When I can get to the Iowa's adjustment, I think a little bit, Eric, was like, they played like kind of off the skip a little, right, in the second half, whereas they went to the short roll in the first half, and then they got those pick and pops. Again, like Cooper Koch has a season best 4 for 6 from 3. Like you have to have some of that stuff when you're not as talented as the other team. Tavion Banks, in addition to making like the baskets, every one of the ones Eric's referencing was off Chinyelu. In the first half was Banks over Chinyelu. And then he makes the like 3 in like a super well contested 3 over Xavier Lee in the second half. And you're just kind of like, wow, like what can he even do when he's going to make a 25-footer, but there's a perfect contest? That kind of stuff is going to happen. But again, like Florida helped on the short roll a little bit, whether that was an adjustment. Well, boom, now you have sort of the pick and pop, and they were able to get some of that. But even in that scenario, like I felt like it was Bennett Sturtz that just kept Iowa calm, man. Like I know he was 0 for 9 from 3, and like honestly, that's why Iowa, the rest of their shooters went 7 of 15 for 3, which like was the only path to victory for them, was for those guys to be really good if Sturts wasn't. But like Sturts didn't have a turnover. He played 40 minutes against a top 6 defense, and he didn't turn the ball over once. And like the one bad pass he threw, like their guy made an incredible save. It was in the first half. It was like by the Florida bench. And guy was like falling out of bounds and somehow saved it to himself, basically. And then I think Florida committed like a stupid foul like seconds later. And so it went from like almost Bennett Sturts turnover to Iowa free throws. It was kind of like, and the Iowa radio people were right next to me, and like their color guy goes, well, we might be in for a good one tonight, because he goes, I don't think we've had that fortunate a sequence all season. And I'm just kind of thinking, yeah, I mean, and that's before, like, I'm not going to, the Forgaris scuffle with Condon, the way that gets sorted out. I mean, there are plenty of breaks for Iowa. I will say Bert Smith came over and told the radio, Westwood One, which is about 4 seats down from me, what happened, or what he perceived to be what happened. And it tracks what Todd Golden said, which was that Bert Smith said that Fulgaris threw a punch at the player, not at the ball, as some Iowa fans have said, and that it didn't connect. And so because it didn't connect, they did not eject him from the game. I actually don't think that's the rule, but whatever. Like, that's how it got resolved. And obviously he ends up on the floor at the end after the Florida run. And I think, again, like, because of Bennett Sturts, like, they never really panicked. Condon makes a layup with a minute and a half to go, and like they come down, and Bennett Sturts catches the defense sleeping for a dunk, and it's a 1-point game again. Like, this is just an incredible performance by an All-American point guard.
Yeah, so Ben McCollum is, of course, I've already mentioned that I think he's one of the best coaches in America. And I've been following him for a couple of years now. And I remember on a podcast when he was still at Northwest Missouri State, he was talking about this really slow style of play, which is really interesting. And I think that everyone who, well, maybe some people know this, but like when you think about some of the teams that are really dominant at the Division II level, there's Nova Southeastern, which of course a lot of listeners in Florida will be aware of. Like, they play at an absolute breakneck pace, 1,000,000 miles per hour. You think about like West Liberty or Fairmont State, some of these coaches where Joe Mazzulla coached, and where, a lot of people know IU Indy took the coach from West Liberty, and they played 1,000,000 miles per hour. Like, Division II is an extremely, extremely fast game. And a lot of the coaches that are really known for being dominant, such as Jim Crutchfield at Nova Southeastern, it is all about this frantic, full court pressing, the Bucky McMillan, like, it's about playing the really fast trapping style, play in transition, get up and out. So then you've got like Ben McCollum, who's doing the exact opposite thing, playing super, super slow, as slow as imaginable. And I remember listening to him on a podcast years ago, and he talked about kind of the reasons why he did that. And one of the reasons why he did it was because he's like, hey, we know that at the end of tight games against good teams, it turns into a half court game. He's like, you can be 8 seconds or less all you want, but when it comes down to it, the game is about executing when you need to slow down and do something in the half court. And so that is why they are committed to just doing it all the time. And they don't have to adjust to late game scenarios when they value the ball like they do all the time. And they call a great set down the floor all the time. So like there is no change. And like you mentioned it, Neil, like the way that like Sturts plays, he played the last possession like it was the first possession of the game, or like it was the 30th possession of the game. Like they play that way all the time, and they just never get rattled because of it. And I do find that to be really fascinating. And then I of course wonder a little bit, like with this Florida team that, with no fault of their own, the SEC is down this year. Florida doesn't play many close games. And it just felt like there was one team that was way more composed at the end of a tight game. And that's just like very interesting for those who are like supporters of the Ben McCollum style of play. I would say that this was like a perfect example where like they didn't have to change into their late game offensive mode. They didn't have to change to NCAA tournament mode with the longer timeouts and more stop it. Like this is how they do things all the time. And yeah, Florida, whether it was, composure in a lot of ways, was lacking. And I think that's another thing that's really interesting to look as Florida looks towards building another roster. But I do think that's important, where I feel like it's almost like a little bit of the storyline is like, wow, that's incredible that Iowa won with Bennett Sturtz playing bad. Like, man, that guy was, I still thought he was incredible. And the moments that they needed to break some pressure. Another kind of uncharacteristic thing we saw from the Gators, which was also interesting when I was thinking about this earlier, Neil, when you were talking about dictating style of play, like Florida played into Iowa's style of play because they started pressing, giving that 3-quarter press just to take time off the shot clock, which I actually thought was a good idea in the sense that Iowa runs really good stuff in the half court, so give them less time to do it and it'll help your defense. But at the same time, like, this is a Florida team that has just been so steadfast in how they wanted to play all season long. And this is like the one time they make. And so I already felt like the players kind of saw that Florida was sounding the alarm bells, from the changing lineups to the changing style of play to playing into the tempo. I feel like it would be impossible for these players not to lose a little bit of the composure. And that's just another thing too. Like, if you want to have this ethos of like, this is what we do. It's just, Florida did it, pretty much every second of the entire season until it came to Iowa. And, whether or not that's the right or wrong decision, that'll be up to the listeners here. But I think you also mentioned Koch was maybe one of the players just hit outrageous shots. He had the really difficult one over Urban Klavzar, which is another one where people might remember they got a switch, and you probably would have thought it would have been Bennett Sturtz taking on a big for Florida. Instead, they threw it on the perimeter to Koch, guarded by Urban Klavzar. And I was like, why would you throw it to him on the perimeter? And he was not able to create any space against Klavzar. And then he just rose up and hit an outrageous 3. And that was another one where, like, there's really like no 1 or 2 or 3 possession basketball game where you can't look at a couple of plays and be like there is always luck involved. Like, this is basketball. And so there are certainly moments like that, while also still acknowledging just like what a game from Iowa and their Missouri Valley roster.
Yeah, that's great stuff on I think you're right. Like, and that's more of a Ben McCullum masterclass that you're addressing. Like, Florida just sort of being on its heels the whole time. I actually loved the move to the press. And it was exactly for the reason that you said. Like, Iowa was doing so well in all their half court stuff. Like, why let them get into that right away? And I also think Florida thought, like, okay, they're going to play Bennett Sturtz 40 minutes. Okay, they're going to play Kyle Combs 35 minutes. Like, make them work the whole time. I think that also is kind of clever, because I did notice, like, one of Iowa's tricks to get Sturtz rest. I texted Eric about this before the game, and because they did it against Clemson and they did it against Florida. Like, they'll just put Sturtz in the shooter's corner for 20 seconds on a possession and let, like, Kyle Combs or Tavion Banks dribble, like, near the logo. And then they start their action with 15 seconds to go. And it's basically 15 seconds of rest for Bennett Sturtz. Everybody else is moving. He is not. And then they run stuff. It's just, I thought it was one of the few things that Florida did that, like, Iowa kind of had to then react to. And in that respect, more of the testament to the coaching class. Before we get into the plays everybody wants us to talk about, or everybody turns off the podcast because they don't want us to talk about, gotta ask you guys something. If you're still watching the madness for the Sweet 16, which I hope you are, and if you want to get paid from it now that the Gators are out, you kind of keep your engagement. A lot of brackets are done, but our guys at MyBookie are just getting started. This is where you can make your move. Single games, live bets, catch the swings before the odds adjust. You don't need a perfect bracket. You just need the right read at the right time on a game. Who do you got in the Battle of the Corn, for example? They played 2 epic ones already this season. Nebraska won in overtime on their senior night. Iowa manhandled Nebraska, holding them to a season low in points per possession in Iowa. You can bet on that one. If you're going to be in it, you might as well be in it to win it. Head to mybookie.ag, use the promo code Neil500, get your first bet covered up to $500. If it misses, activate the bet back bonus. Run it back. The tournament is still going on, even if the Gators aren't playing in it. Make sure you head over to mybookie.ag. We appreciate their sponsorship. All right, final couple plays. We really could start with like the possession before, which was an empty possession for Florida, where Boogie Flan Florida just stood around for 20 seconds and did nothing. And then Boogie Flan drives, takes some contact from Combs. It looked like, the ball got tipped away. They didn't call a foul. So we assume that Combs tipped the ball away, and they go back, review it. It was off Flan's hand. Sturts comes down and hits the leaner right over Flan. One of the few front straight line drives, by the way, that Flan sort of stayed in front of, and Sturts just hit a tough shot. And then I don't know what happened. Oh, Brown, Florida, something happened. Florida misses. Oh, Houck goes for the 2 dagger threes, which were actually 2, speaking of losing your composure, just kind of uncharacteristic Tommy Houck plays, when I thought like part of what keyed Florida's comeback was attacking the paint and getting to the free throw line. And then Sturts misses. Florida played great defense. Brown gets a rebound. 1 of 2 free throws. Sets the stage with 8.9 seconds left for what happened. And we'll let Eric talk about that. And then I can give my kind of thoughts on it.
Yeah. So again, this is where the Patreon was really good to really go at quarter speed through everything that happened on the defensive play. So I would encourage everyone to join and watch there. But it was, I guess we do need to discuss that Gold said afterwards the plan was to foul up 2, which is something that they've talked about ever since their time at San Francisco, as a kind of radical analytics idea to just kind of eliminate your chance at exactly what happened, giving up a 3. You foul up 2, worst case scenario, you're now tied and you have the ball. And if you're the favorite, like Florida was in this situation, you probably like your chances in overtime. This is not the first time Florida has talked about how they wanted to foul up 2. They talked about Golden talked about wanting to do it in a couple situations at San Francisco. Talked about a couple of times he'd want to do it at Florida. They've never done it. So it's I do think that needs to be taken with a grain of salt when Golden starts talking about how the plan was to foul, because I'll kind of believe it when I see it. It's been talked about so much. It's never been executed. And I would say if this was something that wanted to be executed, you wouldn't have guarded the way that you did, because you wouldn't be so concerned with all out denying, risking a chance of giving the ball to a guard turning up, because you would be content to get the ball. In fact, you'd actually want to foul quite quickly, because you'd still be wanting to leave yourself time to go and score yourself. So it does need to be noted that Golden said they were planning on fouling up 2. I personally take that with a grain of salt. But whatever the case may be, it was lined up that it was very clear that Sturts was going to get a screen coming back towards the ball. Florida chose to have Isaiah Brown, I believe, covering the ball. Fland ended up trailing the play, really got ahead of steam from Sturts, and he was able to get downhill. A couple kind of things I would note, and this is where the Patreon's really good to point out. It's probably a situation where Fland, who was used to being faster than everyone, did not realize how fast Bennett Sturts was, because really good defenders like Fland, you can get beat and then you can recover. And you can see that all the time where he kind of gambles in a passing lane or gambles for a steal, and you might, and for a brief moment is giving up a lane, and then he recovers with the speed, and he chases the outside shoulder of Sturts as he comes around the screen. And that is something you only do if you think you are going to be able to outrun the guy and get back in front. As we saw, he was not able to do that. I think I was one of the only people to point this out. Then I was listening to CBS, and I saw Adam Finkelstein pointed this out, and he said, he's like, I'm the only one who's pointed this out. And I was like, well, I think I was one of the ones on Twitter at least, but I thought that the inbounds pass was brilliant from Iowa and was like a lot more difficult than people saw it. I think people are like, oh, how do you let Bennett Sturts catch that ball going so fast? Like, what an absolute breakdown by Florida. Like, anyone who watched the Patreon will see that, like, as we watch it, like, slowly, like, it was a tight angle. Boogie Fland came very close to tipping it away. Like, I don't think this was like an all out stupid thing for Fland to do, to chase the way he did. And he made a great play on the ball, and Florida's inbound, or Iowa's inbounder, put the ball in just the exact perfect spot. And from there, we kind of know Sturts is kind of racing down the floor at 1 million miles per hour. Hauk is put into a really difficult spot. I thought Hauk was in, like, given the circumstances, Hauk was in the perfect position, kind of, splitting Vulgaris as much as he can while taking away that straight line to the rim by Sturts. And again, it's kind of talked about as such, this monumental breakdown by Florida. And I don't think Florida guarded this one well. I don't think they set themselves up well. However, Vulgaris, who's like still sprinting up the sideline, catches the pass and has to backpedal to get his feet behind the line as functionally a center, shooting 32% from three. And Condon was under the rim doing exactly what he needed to do. He couldn't leave too early because he couldn't give up a lob at the rim. I do think he should have given a little bit of that, like, Luke Cornett closeout. Like, he didn't jump. He didn't even try to deter the shot. I really think he should have. I'm not saying he would have blocked it, but I do think he could have put some pressure on with any closeout. So I kind of wish he didn't bail out on the play like that. But those are kind of the all characters involved. I think there was a chance that Xavier Lee, if he was maybe a bit more engaged, would have had a chance to switch onto Sturts once he saw that Boogie Fland was. And again, this is where I don't think Florida was actually going to foul up too, because if they were, Lee would have absolutely left his man in an instant to take away Bennett Sturts. I would also say Florida wouldn't be covering the ball if that was the plan to do it. But that's one thing you could say. I don't fault Xavier Lee for not switching, but kind of wish he switched. And then you got Isaiah Brown on the ball, which is not his decision, obviously, but I would not have put him there. I would have, if you really didn't want Bennett Sturts to get the ball, I would have not covered the inbounder, and I would have double teamed, bracketed Sturts. I certainly would have switched an action where they set a screen to get Sturts open, and Florida didn't do that. And I also just thought the way that they lined up, it was just like, it couldn't have been more clear what Iowa was trying to do. And Florida just didn't really try to take it away. And and if Florida was really trying to foul, they would have made sure everything was kept in front, wouldn't have worried about covering the ball. They would have taken it out of Bennett Sturts' hand, because as much as you're willing to give up 2 free throws with that strategy, ideally you want someone other than Bennett Sturts taking those free throws. And I both don't think it was like, so many people are like, this is the stupidest thing in basketball history. What did Florida do? I don't think it was that bad, while also being very clearly, like, it was clearly poor late game defensive play design by the Gators. So those are all my thoughts about what were you seeing, Neil?
Yeah, I mean, I saw a lot of what you saw. It was all right. The shot was right in front of me. There were funny photographs where there's one photograph where Fulgaris has released the shot, and I don't know. Maybe I'll post it in the Patreon or something. Anyway, you can see my face in the background, and it is the face of a man who knows that the 32% shooter who had to shuffle his feet before he could get the shot off and backpedal was making that shot no matter what. The basketball gods insisted it. And so anyway, that was my face. You just said one of the things I thought, which is that if you're going to foul, like, why are you covering up on the ball? Like, that was one thing I thought. Like, let's operate under where they intended to foul, right? And because Sturts got loose, they couldn't foul. And so regardless of what happens on if Fulgaris makes it, great. If he misses it, great. Either way, if you intended to foul, you failed because Sturts got loose. So the process failed. And I wouldn't have had anyone on the ball if I wanted to foul. I probably also wouldn't have trailed the ball screen if I wanted to foul, to be honest, which is something I tweeted. I said, I'm not really sure what Florida was doing here if they wanted to foul. If you don't want to foul, I think you absolutely could trail the ball screen because you have Boogie Fland, and he's really good at that. And to Eric's point, like they had to make a really difficult pass. And I do think Flan was still a little bit confused as to how fast Sturtz was at that point in the game. But, Flan was right there. And you can really see, by the way, on the Patreon video where Eric slows it down, go and watch this because you can see how close Flan was to tipping that ball away and blowing up the whole play. Savion Lee. And this was the tough one for me. I just think he deserves the heat here. First of all, there's Tate Sage sets a screen. He as soon as Sage sees that Fland is trailing, he moves up too. So, I mean, it's a moving screen. Whatever. They're never calling that. I'm not complaining about it. I'm just saying he's moving. And Fland steps up to Sage initially, and then it looks like Sage kind of yanks him a little bit on the screen. But, like, and Todd Golden pointed out, like, we didn't recover or help. And so, like, there's just not a scenario in the world where I believe that Lee did what he was supposed to be doing. I think when he stepped up, he messed up. I think even if they didn't intend to foul, he should have helped switch there. He did not. I think he should have seen that because he knows that Boogie likes to trail ball screens. He's played with him for 30-something games. That's not something even if it's instantaneous, you should know that from playing with someone that long as a defender. And that should just be kind of muscle memory to switch there. And as soon as he moves towards Sage, the only way he can be an impactful defender at that point is to switch, because he cannot get back and recover because he's moving the other direction. So he has to switch, and he doesn't do so. So he messes up by stepping up, and then when he could have moved laterally and stepped over, that would have been the first thing to do to help. But certainly should have switched. Just a disastrous sequence from Savion Lee in my mind. Tommy Houck, I feel bad for him. He had to make a split-second decision whether to help on a rim run or to, like, stay on a corner shooter who wasn't quite in the corner yet. And I think that part is important. If you're going to criticize Houck, you need to realize that, like, when Sturtz releases the ball, as Eric has beautifully mentioned, like, Fulgaris is not just sitting in the corner waiting for it. That would have been different, I think. But that's not what was happening, and Houck had to make sort of a split-second call. He does have Tommy Condon there, but if Condon peels away to help, like, there's another shooter in that. So, like, again, like, this is very hard. I thought Houck did pretty much everything he could do, to be quite frank. And right in front of me, I would actually point out that, Houck kind of, like, he reacted late, or maybe he tips the Sturtz pass. But otherwise, like, I thought he was pretty good. So, and then Fulgaris just hits the shot. So that was that for me. The final play for Florida. Also, a lot of detail on the Patreon. Hammer action, super high degree of difficulty play to execute. So there are two things I saw at floor level, and interested in Eric's thoughts on this. One is that after Houck set the screen for the hammer, he briefly was wide open in the middle of the paint. And I thought if Lee was going to pass, the time to pass was with like 2 seconds left, and to just make the read that Klavzar is not open and Houck is. That is, now, I just crucified Lee on defense. That is not fair to criticize Savion Lee, whose head is down and is going 1,000,000 miles an hour, for missing that. But I do think Houck flashed open. If the idea was to get a duck in to Tommy or a pass to Tommy, which it wasn't, this is a hammer play for Klavzar, then, I think Lee could have passed earlier. Otherwise, I thought Lee just kind of took too wide an angle. Like, Iowa played fine defense, but Lee had Combs beat on the corner. He's clearly around him with about 2 seconds left. If you freeze it, And so if he cuts to the block, it's a layup or a foul. Fulgaris was very late with his help. Terrible defense by Fulgaris, honestly. I don't know what he was doing for the first second or why he was so late. Lee saw him in the corner of his eye and passed, but I mean, if he goes to the rim, the chances it gets pinned on the backboard are very low. It's either a foul or a bucket.
Yeah, I think first it's just kind of important to note when we're talking about the defensive play that went awry. That's pretty disastrous to just give up a 3 in that situation. There's just 100 things Florida could have done better, and there could have been better outcomes than that. When it comes to Florida's last possession, when you've got 4 seconds and you got to go the length of the floor, it's just important to note, even at
Totally.
the best of teams, the best of players, the best of coaches, that's still a tough situation. So just want to make it known that this is kind of different levels of criticism. But yeah, Florida draws up this hammer play where there's a baseline drive, and then there's someone from the corner lifts up and sets a back screen for a shooter on the wing. It opens up a possibility to throw a pass, rifle it down the baseline, and manufacture a corner 3. Pretty in a vacuum, I would also say, trying to do that in 4 seconds in a full court setting is extremely difficult to do. I also do have just a bias in that I don't like hammer plays. They're just the window to execute them is so minuscule. So I find it to be a very low percentage play. When it works, man, is it beautiful though? I will say that. So for Xavier Lee to just be absolutely cooking down the sideline at 1,000,000 miles per hour, it looked like he had no intention of trying to score. It looks like he had full intention of getting down the floor as quickly as possible so he could get to the baseline and throw a pass with his length, which I also feel is why he had the ball in that situation to make that hammer pass to Klavzar. And yeah, and again, Florida had Hauk setting that hammer screen. I would also say Florida didn't mask the hammer screen action at all. So you could tell that, I forget who was guarding it for Iowa. He saw it coming a mile away and got under the screen and took Klavzar out of it. I also do think that Klavzar left early and Hauk left early. They both, just in trying to execute the hammer action, they left early. And because they left early and Iowa was able to very easily get underneath it, because it was kind of an obvious, the way that Florida lined up, it was quite obvious what they were going to do. I don't know if an Iowa staff member was able to call it out live, but whatever the case may be, it was very quick right away that the hammer action was not there. And I think for Lee just going at that speed, having to make it up the floor that quickly, his first read was had to be the hammer. Maybe his second was when he got the first kind of step was oh, I might have a chance to score. And then from there, I just think, I also think that Florida could have set that hammer screen higher up than they did. It was quite low, which meant that after Hauk set the screen, there wasn't a great angle for him to cut to the rim and get a pass. Like you mentioned, Neil, there was maybe a slight window, but it was still, it would have been a tough play for Lee. And then if you're Lee, given the situation, you do have to do anything but what you did. You just got to get that ball on the rim, get it on the backboard. You can't just throw it at the feet of it's not it looked hockey where you just throw it into the crease and hope to get a bounce. And you can't do that. And I know it also would have been, given the time. And I don't think the fact that Lee was able to get his clean, off that step up screen, pretty remarkable. I do think you need to have an option kind of trailing that guy on any hammer screens, because I think the read on any hammer play has to be hammer isn't there. There needs to be someone right behind them for just an easy pitch back. I think that would have been the play, and Florida could have shot an off balance, jumper, which again, I'm not saying would have won the game. So it would have been a tough shot. It's always difficult for us. When we're talking about the defensive possession, it's Florida needs to design their defense better. They need to execute better. When it comes to the last play, didn't love what Florida drew up. You didn't execute great, but the percentages are so low at that point. I'm not killing him for that, but it was unfortunately somewhat, darkly poetic that the season started with Lee taking a lot of slander and the season ended with him kind of throwing it at the feet of his teammates in the paint. And, that's going to be a frustrating visual that to lose a game without a shot attempt. And maybe the real poetic situation, I shouldn't say it's darkly poetic, that the season started with a lot of people unsure about the play of Lee, and the season ends with the ball in his hands. But, Florida won a game, won the national championship last year with Houston unable to get a shot attempt when they needed a shot attempt to win the national championship, and Florida won on that instance. And 1 year later, Florida's the team that can't get a shot up when they need it most in the NCAA tournament. So maybe that's the poetic portion of it. But it's two plays we've talked about for like 20 minutes now. That says a lot about the game and just how crazy the ending was.
Yeah, I mean, what does it say about March when we just talked about 8.9 seconds of basketball for 20 minutes? And that was my article in Saturday Down South, was definitely a cruel irony that, it had a great irony for Florida fans. Very bittersweet that they win a natty by preventing a shot, and then they fail to defend their natty because they can't get up a shot. Eric's breakdown of it at the Patreon is great. Again, I thought it was interesting, because you kind of had a tale of two worlds where Tate Sage beautifully reads what Florida is doing, immediately. And just, he's all over the hammer. It's not going to work on Clavsar. By the way, fantastic point on why it was Lee and not Fland. A lot of our listeners wanted to know because, Fland has been pretty effective at getting to the basket the last couple months of the season. A criticism of him in November, a strength of his late in the year. Maybe his length and his height is why they did that. I thought kind of a fantastic point. And, another irony for me is I watched this play probably 10 times now, and I still don't know what Alvaro Fogueras was doing. And I got maybe he was spooked by the fact that Houck kind of flashed open for a split second in the middle of the paint, but he steps towards him and he was very late to help. And I thought, I don't even know if it has to be a step back jumper, quite honestly. I think, either unless Tavian Combs is blocking that shot from behind, Cale Combs, I'm not really sure Fogueras gets to it without a foul. So, I thought he kind of fell asleep after being the hero, which would have been how tragic for Iowa if your hero is a GOAT seconds later, but that's not how it worked out. And that's basketball in March. Go to Patreon, check all that out. We'll get into roster construction, portaling, building. North Carolina has no head coach. Hubert Davis.
Yeah, that broke just as 15 minutes ago while we were recording. Of course, by the time people listen to this, they'll probably know. But me and Neil are seeing this kind of live.
Yeah, live as we record. Hubert Davis has resigned. That was expected, at least in Carolina circles. It took all day. Roy Williams was very mad. I guess initially the new athletic director, Steve Newmark, didn't want to pay all of Hubert's buyout. So it got kind of messy, but looks like at the end of the day, Hubert's going to get every cent. He's going to resign. He's going to get a nice job in admin. And we'll see, Florida fans. I can tell you that if Todd Golden is the head coach at North Carolina, I will be stunned. I just don't think that there's much of a chance that Todd Golden is leaving Florida for Chapel Hill. That said, would it shock me if a former University of Florida head coach were the head coach at North Carolina next year? Not even a little bit. Not even a little bit, folks. And maybe we'll have a full Patreon to kind of, if that happens, we'll have a Patreon therapy session where we can all come on and everybody can talk about their feelings about one Billy Donovan wearing a Carolina blue blazer. But we'll see. That's going to be interesting. On the Florida front, I would expect Golden to sign some sort of extension. Again, back-to-back one seeds for the first time in program history. Florida wins the SEC championship. I would say a successful season for Florida. But anytime you win a championship, it's a successful season. also a failed postseason. I think you can say both things, and they can both be true. I think you kind of have to in this scenario. It's a single elimination tournament. I started the show by saying that. Sometimes the best team doesn't win. I don't know if Florida was the best team in the country. I don't know if they would have gotten out of Houston this weekend. But certainly a better team than Iowa, but they weren't on Sunday night. And so their season ends at 27-8 with another SEC championship for the program. But, obviously falling short of their goals in both the SEC tournament and the NCAA tournament. Fawcett, any final thoughts?
This will be a really interesting offseason, for sure. I know that people, of course, whenever your season closes, it's time to start talking about who's staying, who's going, and who's gonna be brought in. And I know Florida is already, Florida's got some targets in mind. I think a lot of people are interested in who will return of the players that have eligibility remaining. That'll be fascinating. And I feel like it comes to this episode, and I don't want to make it sound like it's like the end of the season, because at least in terms of the podcast, because we don't slow down. From more kind of post-mortem episodes to the portal. Florida may lose some assistants to different head coaching jobs. We're not slowing down here, but we do know that this is going to be, maybe a lot of you will not listen as regularly. We hope you do stay and listen regularly, but because of that, just want to say thank you to everyone who really listened this year and had some of our most listened to shows ever throughout the year. I think I might be making that up. I think Neil knows better than me, but correct. I'll just say, okay, whatever the case may be. Some of our most listened to episodes. The show continues to grow that way. And of course, for all of you that support us on Patreon, who are really the people that ensure that this kind of still keeps going as a media entity, that number just continues to climb and continues to climb. And I think that that's just like the biggest kind of advertisement for why you should join, that there's people that have been subscribing for 2 years and continue to do so. And the number just continues to go up. And I think there's always going to be some people that think about closing out their subscription when the season closes, which is like kind of funny to me, because I think the off season is better on the Patreon than in the season. Truthfully, a lot of my in-game breakdown stuff is pretty good, I think. But when it comes to the transfer portal, when it comes to actually getting eyes on, I see people send me all the time. They're talking in their group chats with friends about different mid-major transfers that none of their friends have ever watched. And they're talking about them like experts, but you can be the expert. We do those kind of film studies talking about players that Florida's after. It of course would be very interesting for a lot of reasons to go back and look at some of the off-season content on Xavier Lee and Boogie Fland. And anyways, I just wanted to extend a heartfelt thanks to our Patreon supporters, and just know that, the content is not at all slowing down there. So would encourage everyone to join and support that way. But that's kind of my last thoughts at the moment. And I'm very thankful for everyone who listens and supports.
Yeah, let me echo those sentiments. Patreon.com/FloridaBB Hour. Still the best way to support us. Please continue to do so during the offseason. I agree with Eric. Between his breakdowns of potential portal candidates and a lot of the insider stuff I get, I think that's valuable. I think we were first on Desmond Claude last year on Florida passing. We were first on Xavier Lee. We're often first these days, which is a far cry from years ago. But all that stuff goes to our Patreon people. We're not we don't just throw that on Twitter anymore. And there's not much of a point in doing that. And so, anyway, and then you'll get the breakdowns of guys that Florida targets. So make sure to check that out. I also want to thank Eric. I know that at this point in time, he's, as I mentioned at the top of the show before he got on, he's kind of a national figure in the sport of college basketball now. So the fact that he has stuck with Florida Basketball Hour both is certainly a great privilege for me, and I think a really big privilege for all of you that he remains committed to providing tremendous coverage of a great program while also doing all the other stuff he does in the sport. And that probably won't be the case at some point in time. But we're certainly thankful for you. So thanks, buddy. I appreciate you very much. And yeah, that's it, guys. SEC champions, a 1 seed. I think if I told you all that before the season and didn't tell you how it ended, you would have taken all of it. But you know, I was telling my wife, and I'll send us away with this. I was telling my wife, I got home at about 2 a.m. from Tampa, and my wife woke up and did the Gators win, which was, God, I love my wife. And I said, no, they lost pretty much at the buzzer. And she said, you got to be kidding me. And I said, unfortunately, I'm not kidding you. And, you know, so the next morning we're making coffee and it's all blended together. And she says, isn't that 2 of the last 3 years that Florida's basically been eliminated at the buzzer in the NCAA tournament? And I said, yeah. So everyone can spare us the lectures about being lucky with Walter Clayton Jr. It balances out in March, whether it's KJ Simpson or Alvaro Figueres. Thank you all for listening. It's a privilege to do the show. It's a privilege to work with Eric. Go Gators. Keep attacking closeouts.